Hi guys, welcome back to another Game Dev Diary entry for the Shadow. There are a couple of things here that I announced in the last video, like the industrial level stuff, that is now ready to be shown. Of course, not all the elements are in here. Some of them still need to be textured, some of the more simple stuff I still need to model, but it's definitely getting to a point where I'm really happy with how this looks. And I'll introduce I'll introduce you to a couple of the elements and why they're in there. So the prominent one here is definitely this molten metal flow. The interior of this whole industry complex where the droids build the elements that they need, other droids, parts of the city and things like that, that all happens here. And the player can get into parts of this massive complex. Good. So let's take a look. There are a couple of elements in here that need some explaining so that you get an idea of why they're there and how they work in terms of gameplay. This molten flow here of this metal, these elements are basically just to give the level more depth. You've seen similar elements in the outdoor levels, in the city levels that I've introduced in the past couple of videos. And these also serve like the purpose of illustrating what is happening in this complex and how it works. The molten metal outlet and the intake down here obviously serve as traps that the player needs to evade. Some of them will flow constantly and need to be turned off by the player by hacking into certain systems. Some of them cannot be hacked but have a timed interval so that the player needs to time running through them or underneath them while not getting burned to death. Otherwise, it's of course instant incineration and death. So these elements here, the smaller ones, are what I call the heat vents. They release streams of hot air and fire, grilling the player when he walks past them and they activate. These elements over here are connected to the interior of the entire structure and will produce like metal forms or metal blocks that then get pressed into form by what I call the stomper, another nasty piece of machinery that can crush the player instantly and also are timed and sometimes can get deactivated by the player. The other part of a kind of delivery line is this intake. It's a hydraulic press that takes elements and then crushes them into the back there. The platforms here look a little bit different than those droid platforms in the outer city level parts, because they are just there for the player to run on and for stuff to get transported from A to B, for instance. There will be different versions of this, some with conveyor belts and some like these just for the player to walk on. They are remnants of the old, still human-driven kind of part of the structures. The lights here, yeah, the characteristic government blue, illustrating that everything is powered by electricity. They are here because they look cool, and of course, what is important to me is that the player can read the level easily, so the player immediately knows where, if an area is accessible to him. Yeah, when the player looks up, which will be a feature that I introduce later in the game. Later in the game development process, the player can then easily tell, oh, yeah, okay, there is an accessible area up there. I can walk up there. So how do I get there? That is basically the secondary purpose of these blue elements and the lights that I put pretty much everywhere. Just like with this, if you see those, you know that there is a stomper there somewhere or something, some piece of machinery that works. On the other hand, these glowing elements also will illustrate whether or not, for instance, this lava, I always call it lava, the molten metal element here is going to release a flow of molten metal. And there is another version of it with the lights being turned off when it's not that active, which then looks like this. So very easy to see that there's no threat right now. And as soon as the system activates, the lights grow brighter and the emission lights grow brighter, and the player knows there's some flow of lava coming very soon. The same is true for the heat vents, for instance. As soon as those become active, you'll be able to tell. Because they brighten up a lot more. And then, of course, the not yet implemented flame particle effect, visual effect, will blast flames across the platform, causing the player to burn up as soon as he runs into them. So this will be part of an entire interior structure that will show you a lot of the interior that you don't have access to. But because it's all one level, you can later on in the game gain access to other parts of this level and see parts of the level that you've been in before when you explore a new area. So it all connects in the end. It feels like one organic, massive complex. There are other elements here like these that have nothing to do with the gameplay. They just let you look a little bit further into the actual structure and give you a sense of depth. And then there's far more machinery behind those walls than you can actually see. The other element that we have that is very similar, for instance, to the elevator system for the city are these access doors. They lead into a small hallway with a door that opens and closes. As soon as the player walks through it, it closes behind him. And then they have one access point that one destination point where the player then walks out of, and those elements will give the player the ability to move from one section of this level part to another and go back and forth between those two. They only go up or down in one direction to one point. So the player needs to find out where they will take him and then find his way through the level. Some of them might be locked, so the player needs to unlock them by hacking or by providing power to them. The industrial levels are far more jump and run heavy than hacking, and for instance, there will be almost no droids in here. There will be, however, other systems that will try to catch the player, like the automated turrets that are introduced in the last, and other elements that will try to make sure that the system is not being infiltrated by some pesky human being. So I'll be working on other elements in here and will build an entire separate industry level that shows what happens when I am up here and walk over, and you can see not the city, but the interior of the rest of the level in there while the player runs from over a huge chasm into another part of the level. So yeah, I hope you like it so far, and leave some comments. If you have questions, leave them as well. Like, subscribe, share, and follow me during my development of the shadow. If you like, it would be appreciated if you do that, and hopefully I'll get something really playable in a couple of weeks. Cheers, guys.